What would you do if a desperate billionaire offered you $1 million to save his family? Duh. In the glittering towers of Manhattan, Lucas Stone has everything money can buy, except the one thing that matters most. When his late wife's family threatens to take away his 3-year-old son, Oliver, this grieving single dad makes an impossible offer to the only person he trusts, his nanny, Lily Bennett. Asterisk Storytime fam, and this one is dripping with romance, secrets, and one unforgettable twist. Let's jump straight into it. Asterisk, the marble floor beneath Lily's bare feet felt like ice as she stared at the white envelope on her nightstand. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lucas Stone's penthouse, Manhattan stretched endlessly, its lights blinking like the eyes of predators waiting in the dark. She had been awake for 3 hours, replaying his words, feeling the weight of $1 million pressing against her chest like a stone. "You cannot buy me," she whispered to the empty room, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air. Conditioning. But her hands trembled as she said it. Down the hall, Oliver's soft breathing filtered through the baby monitor, steady and innocent, 3 years old, with his father's dark hair and his mother's gentle eyes. The child who called her Lilyflower and clung to her hand during thunderstorms. The boy who had no idea his entire world was about to shatter. Lucas Stone sat in his study, 38 floors above the city that had made him untouchable. His fingers drummed against the mahogany desk where Helen's photograph still watched him with knowing eyes. 3 years since the accident. 3 years of Oliver asking when Mommy was coming home. 3 years of Lucas drowning in boardrooms and mergers, trying to forget the sound of screeching tires and his own cowardice. The custody papers lay spread before him like a death sentence. Helen's parents had money, respectability, a house in Connecticut with white pickets and Sunday dinners. They had everything a judge would want for Oliver. Everything Lucas could never be. "Mr. Stone?" Lily's voice cut through the silence from the doorway. She wore a cotton nightgown that made her look younger than 23, vulnerable in a way that made Lucas's chest tighten with guilt and something darker he refused to name. "You should be sleeping," he said without looking up. "So should you." She stepped into the study, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug. Oliver had a nightmare.
Ow.
He was calling for his mama again. The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He finally looked at her, taking in the way her honey-colored hair fell in waves around her shoulders. The way her green eyes held shadows that matched his own. She was beautiful in an understated way that made expensive women look artificial. Real. She was the only real thing in his house of glass and steel. "The hearing is in 2 weeks," he said, gesturing to the papers. "Helen's parents have hired Morrison and Associates. They're claiming I'm an unfit father." Lily moved closer, and he caught the scent of her vanilla shampoo mixed with something. "Uniquely her. You love Oliver more than your own life. Love isn't enough." The words tasted bitter. "They have a family. A mother figure. Stability. All I have is money and a nanny who will leave the moment she finds something better. I would never leave Oliver." The conviction in her voice was fierce. Protective. "Wouldn't you?" Lucas stood, his height making her crane her neck to meet his gaze. "For the right price? The right opportunity? Everyone has a breaking point, Lily." She stepped back as if slapped. "Is that what you think of me? I think you're young and beautiful and wasting your life. In my shadow." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "I think you deserve more than taking care of another woman's child for a man who can barely look at you without wanting something he can never have." The confession hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Lily's breath caught her cheeks, flushing pink in the lamplight. Lucas eyed the envelope, he said, his voice rough. "I meant every word. One night, $1 million. Enough to finish your degree, buy a house, start the life you deserve. All you have to do is marry me." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Marry you? A marriage of convenience. Legal paperwork to show the judge that Oliver has a stable home to parents who love him. After the custody hearing, we can annul it quietly. You'll have your money, your freedom. Oliver will have his father." Lily's world tilted. This wasn't just about one night. This was about becoming a prop in Lucas's desperate play to keep his son. "You want to buy a wife?" Want to save my child. His voice cracked on the last word. And you're the only person I trust not to destroy us both in the process. She thought of her childhood, bouncing between foster homes where she learned early that love was conditional, that safety was temporary, that everyone eventually left. She thought of Oliver's laugh, his small hand in hers, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. If I say yes, she whispered, what happens to us? To whatever this is between us? Lucas's jaw tightened. There is no us, Lily. There's Oliver, and there's survival. Everything else is a luxury I can't afford. But the way he looked at her said otherwise. The way his hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting not to reach for her, told a different story entirely. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and dangerous possibilities. Outside, the city never slept, never stopped, never forgave. Inside the penthouse, two broken people stood on the edge of a precipice, staring down at a fall that would change everything. I need time to think, Lily said finally. You have until morning. Lucas turned away, dismissing her with the practiced coldness that had built his empire. The lawyers need an answer by noon. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Lily, she turned back, hope flickering in her chest like a candle in the wind. Don't make this about feelings. We both know how that story ends. She left him standing in the lamplight, surrounded by his money and his grief and his desperate love for a child who was running out of time. The envelope waited on her nightstand like a promise and a threat, while Manhattan glittered below like a city of dreams built on other people's nightmares. Dawn crept through the penthouse windows like an unwelcome guest, painting everything in shades of gold and regret. Lily stood in Oliver's doorway, watching him sleep with his dinosaur blanket clutched against his chest. Shadows on his cheeks, and for a moment, she could see Lucas in the curve of his jaw, the stubborn set of his mouth even in sleep. The envelope felt like fire in her hands. She had made her choice somewhere between midnight and morning, in the space between Oliver's soft breathing and the city's endless hunger. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money, Lily Flower. Oliver's sleepy voice made her heart clench. He sat up, hair sticking in every direction, arms reaching for her with the absolute trust that only children possessed. Good morning, sweet boy. She settled on his bed, letting him curl into her side. Did you sleep better after I came in? He nodded against her shoulder. Are you leaving today? The question hit her like a blade between the ribs. What makes you think I'm leaving? Daddy was sad last night. Really sad. People leave when Daddy gets sad. Oliver's matter-of-fact tone broke her heart. Mommy left when he was sad. Mommy didn't leave because your daddy was sad, Lily whispered, smoothing his hair. Sometimes grown-ups have to go places they don't want to go. But I'm not going anywhere, I promise. She hoped it was a promise she could keep. Downstairs, Lucas stood at the kitchen island, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His white shirt was wrinkled, his tie missing, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He looked up when she entered, and the vulnerability in his gaze made her. Breath catch. You look like hell, she said softly. Feel worse. His voice was rough with exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. Have you decided? Instead of answering, she placed the envelope on the granite counter between them. Still sealed. Still pristine. Tell me about Helen. Lucas's face went carefully blank. That's not relevant to our arrangement. If I'm going to marry you, even temporarily, I need to know what I'm walking into. What really happened to her, Lucas? She died in a car accident. You know this? I know the official story. Lily's voice was gentle but unyielding. I also know you blame yourself for something. I see it in the way you look at Oliver sometimes, like you're terrified you'll break him the same way you broke her. Lucas turned away, his shoulders rigid. Outside the windows, New York was waking up, cars flowing through the streets like blood through arteries. Helen found out something she shouldn't have. The night she died, we fought. She took the car and drove off into a storm because she couldn't stand to look at me. What did she find out? That Oliver might not be mine. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. Lily felt the world shift beneath her feet. She had an affair, Lucas continued, his voice flat and emotionless. With my business partner, David Morrison. The same David Morrison whose law firm is now representing her parents in the custody case. Oh God. Lily sank onto a bar stool, pieces clicking into place. He knows, doesn't he? About Oliver. Knows there's a possibility. Ellen never had a paternity test done. She died before we could resolve it. Lucas finally turned to face her, and his eyes were raw with pain. If he can prove Oliver isn't my biological son, I lose everything. Custody case, my claim to him, my right to be his father. But you've raised him since birth? You love him. Love means nothing in family court without blood or legal documentation to back it up. His laugh was bitter. The irony is perfect. I built an empire on contracts and legal loopholes, and I forgot to protect the only thing that actually matters. Lily studied his face, seeing past the expensive facade to the terrified father underneath. Is that why you need a wife? To prove stability while you fight this battle. I need someone who loves Oliver enough to fight for him. Someone who won't run when Morrison starts digging into our lives, looking for ammunition. He moved closer, his gaze intense. I need someone I can trust completely, because if this goes wrong, it destroys us both. What aren't you telling? Me, Lucas. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Morrison doesn't just want custody of Oliver. He wants to destroy me. The affair with Helen was part of a larger plan too. Take over my company. With me discredited as a father and a man, and Helen's shares passing to her parents and through them to him, he gets everything, including Oliver. Including Oliver. Lucas's hands clenched into fists. He calculated it all, made Helen fall. In love with him, convinced her to betray our marriage, then watched as it tore us apart. The only thing he didn't count on was her dying before she could leave me officially. Lily felt sick. Think he's been planning this for years? I know he has. I have proof of financial irregularities, backdated documents, shell companies, designed to siphon money from my businesses, but none of it matters if he gets Oliver. A grieving son-in-law with custody of Helen's child would have legal standing to challenge every deal I've made, every contract I've signed. Why didn't Helen see what he was doing? Because she was lonely, and I was too busy building walls. To notice her heart was breaking, Lucas's voice cracked. By the time she figured out she was being used, it was too late. The affair was documented, the damage done. She came home that night to tell me she wanted to make it right, but I was so angry, so hurt. I said things I can never take back. What kind of things? I told her that maybe Oliver would be better off with Morrison as a father, and maybe she should have married him instead of a man too broken to love her properly. His voice broke completely. Those were the last words. I never spoke to her. She got in the car and drove straight into that storm. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the coffee maker and the distant sounds of the city below. Lily felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not just for Lucas and his guilt, but for Helen, caught between two men who used her love as a weapon. The marriage, she said finally, it's not just about proving stability, is it? You need someone who can help you fight Morrison on his own terms. I need a wife who can't be bought, intimidated, or seduced away from me. His eyes met hers, dark and desperate. Someone who loves Oliver enough to lie under oath if necessary, you're asking. Me to commit perjury? I'm asking you to save a little boy's life. Lily thought of Oliver upstairs, innocent and trusting, with no idea that adults were playing games with his future. She thought of Morrison, calculating and cold, using a dead woman's love to steal her child. She thought of Lucas, broken and desperate, offering her everything he had in exchange for a chance to keep his son. If we do this, she said slowly, if I marry you and help you fight this battle, what happens when it's over? What happens to us? There is no us, remember? But the way he looked at her told a different story. You take your money and start your life. I keep Oliver and try to be the father he deserves. We go back to being strangers who shared a few lies for the greater good. And if I can't do that, if pretending to be your wife makes me want something I can never have. Lucas stepped closer. close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with exhaustion and fear. Then you'll learn what Helen learned, that wanting Lucas Stone is a luxury you can't afford. But when he reached out to touch her face, his hands were gentle, reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Say yes, Lily. Please, help me save my son. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like a cloak. When she opened them again, her voice was steady, resolved. I'll need a ring that looks convincing. In a story about how we fell in love that won't fall apart under scrutiny, she picked up the envelope and handed it back to him. Keep your money, Lucas. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it for Oliver, not for you. The relief that flooded his face was so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment she saw him as he might have been before grief and guilt, carved lines around his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said, moving toward the stairs. This war you're fighting? We might lose everything before it's over. As she climbed toward Oliver's room, she heard Lucas behind her, already on the phone with his lawyers. His voice hard and commanding once again. She remembered the way he'd touched her face, gentle and desperate, and wondered if the most dangerous part of this arrangement wouldn't be Morrison's schemes or custody battles. It would be falling in love with a man who had already buried his heart with his wife. The ring was perfect in its simplicity. A single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious, expensive enough to be believable, but understated enough to suit a woman who supposedly fell in love with Lucas Stone before she knew about his money. Lily turned it on her finger as they sat in the back of the limousine, Manhattan blurring past the tinted windows like a fever dream. Stop playing with it, Lucas murmured, his voice barely audible over the engine. Nervous. Brides don't fidget with their rings. Nervous brides usually have more than 3 days to plan their entire relationship history. She dropped her hand to her lap, hyper-aware of the weight of the band. What if they ask about our first kiss? Our first fight? The moment you knew. You loved me? We met 18 months ago when you started working for me. We maintained professional boundaries for a year before I finally asked you to dinner. Our first kiss was on the terrace of 11 Madison Park, after I told you about Helen and how scared I was to love someone again. His recitation was perfect, clinical, rehearsed. Our first fight was about whether Oliver should call you Mom. You said it was too soon, said I didn't want him to think love was always temporary. And when did you know you loved me? Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The morning Oliver had his appendectomy. You held my hand in the waiting room and told me that some people are born to be fathers, that Oliver was lucky to have me. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. The story was beautiful, plausible, perfect. It was also a lie, built on moments that had never happened between them, feelings that existed only in the carefully constructed narrative his lawyers had helped craft. But as Lily listened to Lucas recite their fictional love story, she wondered why it felt more real than her actual life. The courthouse is just ahead, the driver announced through the intercom. Lily's stomach clenched. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? It's too late for second thoughts. Lucas's voice was gentle but firm. In 20 minutes you'll be Mrs. Stone, and Morrison's timeline moves up considerably. He'll have to show his hand sooner than he wanted. What if showing his hand means destroying us both? Lucas turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense in the afternoon light filtering through the windows. Then we go down fighting, but Oliver stays safe. The Manhattan Marriage Bureau was a study in bureaucratic efficiency. All beige walls and fluorescent lighting that turned everyone's skin sallow. They sat on plastic chairs that had seen too many hurried unions and bitter annulments, waiting for their number to be called. Lucas looked out of place in his expensive suit, like a shark in a goldfish bowl. Stone. A clerk with tired eyes and a coffee-stained blouse beckoned them forward. You have your witnesses? Lily looked around the nearly empty waiting room. In their rush to make this legally binding before Morrison could interfere, they'd forgotten about witnesses. Her heart sank. We'll witness, a voice said behind them. An elderly couple, the woman in a faded yellow dress, the man in a rumpled jacket that had seen better decades. They were holding hands with the easy comfort of people who'd been together long enough to weather every storm. Harold and I have. Been married 52 years, the woman said, smiling at Lily with knowing eyes. We've witnessed a lot of weddings in our time. You look like the kind that might actually make it." "Thank you," Lily whispered, touched by the kindness of strangers. The ceremony itself was perfunctory, efficient, over in less than 10 minutes. Lily repeated words that felt foreign on her tongue, promised to love and cherish a man who'd made it clear their marriage was a business transaction with an expiration date. When the clerk pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas's kiss was brief, gentle, and somehow devastating in its restraint. "Congratulations, Mrs. Stone," he murmured. Against her lips, and for a moment, the title didn't feel like a costume she was wearing. Harold clapped Lucas on the shoulder with surprising strength. "Treat her right, son. The good ones don't come along often." "I know," Lucas replied, his voice rougher than usual. They were married. Lily Stone. The name felt strange and electric. As she signed the certificate, making their lie legally binding. As they walked back to the limousine, Lucas's hand warm and steady on her back, she wondered if this was how Helen had felt on her wedding day. Hopeful and terrified and completely unprepared for what came next. "We need to stop by the house," Lucas said as they settled into the back seat. "Oliver should hear about this from us before anyone else does." The penthouse felt different when they entered as husband and wife. The familiar spaces seemed charged with new possibility and new danger. Oliver was in the living room with Mrs. Chen, his afternoon babysitter, building an elaborate castle out of blocks. "Daddy?" He launched himself at Lucas with the fearless abandon that only 3-year-olds possessed. "Look at my castle. It has a tower for the princess and a moat for the dragon." "It's magnificent," Lucas said, settling onto the floor beside his son. "Oliver, Lily and I have something important to tell you." "Are you in trouble?" Oliver asked, his dark eyes wide with concern. "No, sweet boy. We got married today." Lily knelt beside them, her heart hammering. "That means Lily is going to be your stepmother now. She's going to live with us and help take care of you." Oliver processed this information with the seriousness of a judge, like Cinderella's stepmother. "Not like Cinderella's stepmother," Lily said quickly. "Like a bonus mom who loves you very much and wants to make sure you're safe and happy." "Can I call you Mama, Lily?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She looked at Lucas, saw the same emotion reflected in his eyes. "If you want to," she managed. Mama Lily. Oliver tested the words, then grinned with satisfaction. "I like it. Does this mean we're a family now?" "Yes," Lucas said, his voice thick. "We're a family now." After Mrs. Chen left, and Oliver was settled for his nap, Lucas and Lily stood in the kitchen, the weight of what they'd done settling between them like a third presence. "He's happy," Lily observed. "He doesn't understand what's really happening." Lucas poured himself a scotch with hands that weren't entirely steady. "When this is over, when we get the annulment, he's going to be confused. Hurt. Maybe we don't have to tell him it's ending." The words slipped out before Lily could stop them. Lucas froze, the glass halfway to his lips. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we could make this work. Really work. For Oliver's sake, you don't know what you're talking about." His voice was sharp, defensive. "You're young, beautiful, intelligent. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why would you want to tie yourself to a man who's already buried one wife? Because that little boy in there deserves parents who choose him every day. Because you need someone who understands what you're fighting for. Because maybe I'm tired of being alone. When you realize that choosing me means choosing a lifetime of ghosts and guilt and courtroom battles. When you wake up one morning and realize you've wasted your youth on a man who can never love you the way you deserve, then I'll deal with that when it happens." She moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "But right now, in this moment, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing him." Lucas stared at her for a long moment, something dangerous flickering in his expression. "You don't know what you're asking for, then show me." The air between them crackled with tension, with possibilities neither of them was brave enough to name. Lucas reached for her, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Lily," he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed against the granite counter. Morrison's name flashed on the screen like a curse. "I have to take this," Lucas said, his expression hardening. "Lucas," Morrison's voice was smooth, congratulatory. I hear congratulations are in order. Married today? How romantic. I'm sure the timing is purely coincidental. What do you want, David? To meet your lovely bride, of course. Dinner tomorrow night, I insist. After all, we're practically family now. Lucas's knuckles went white around the phone. We're not. Family? Oh, but we are. Helen was like a sister to me. Soon, little Oliver will be like a son. Morrison's voice turned cold. Bring your wife, Lucas. Let's see if she's as convincing in person as she is on paper. The line went dead. Lucas stared at the phone like it might bite him. What did he want? Lily asked, though she already knew. To meet you, to see if you'll crack under pressure. Lucas's voice was grim. This was just the opening move. Now the real game begins. Lily looked down at her ring, at the symbol of their perfect lie, and wondered if they were strong enough for what was coming. Outside, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Tomorrow they would face Morrison together as husband and wife, fighting for the right to keep a little boy who might not even belong to either of them. But tonight, they were just two broken people who'd promised to save each other, standing in a kitchen full of wedding cake they'd never bought and dreams they'd never dared to voice. The restaurant Morrison chose was a declaration of war disguised as fine dining. La Bernardine, where every table cost more than most people made in a week, where power brokers made deals over wine that predated their own birth. Lily felt the weight of every gaze as the maitre d' them through the dining room, her black dress suddenly feeling too simple, too honest for a room full of beautiful lies. Morrison was already waiting, perfectly positioned at a corner table where he could see everyone who entered and left. He was older than Lucas by perhaps 5 years, silver threading through his dark hair in a way that suggested distinction rather than age. Handsome in the polished manner of a man who'd never wanted for anything, who'd learned early that charm could open doors that money alone could not. Lucas. He rose to greet them, his smile warm and predatory. And this must be the famous Mrs. Stone. Lily, she corrected, offering her hand. Morrison's grip lingered a fraction too long, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring with deliberate intimacy. Forgive me, Lily. Such a lovely name for such a lovely woman. Helen would have adored you. The mention of Lucas's dead wife was perfectly calculated, designed to establish Morrison's connection to the family while reminding everyone at the table of the ghost that haunted their marriage. Lily felt Lucas tense beside her. How thoughtful. Of you to speak for the dead, Lucas said, his voice carrying just enough ice to lower the temperature at their table. Someone should. Morrison's eyes glittered with malice disguised as grief. Helen was such a passionate woman, so full of life. It's tragic that Oliver will grow up without knowing how deeply she loved him. He knows, Lily said softly, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. We make sure he knows every day. We tell him stories about his mother, show him pictures. Love doesn't die just because the person is gone. Morrison studied her with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. How refreshing, and how did you and Lucas meet? The timeline is a bit unclear. We met when I started working for him, Lily replied, sticking to their rehearsed story. I was his nanny, but we kept things professional for a long time. Of course you did. Morrison's smile was sharp as broken glass. Professional boundaries are so important, don't you think? Helen always struggled with that concept. Duh. The barb hit its mark. Lucas's jaw clenched, his hand finding Lily's under the table. His touch was warm, grounding, real in a way that made their performance feel less like acting. Helen was a wonderful mother, Lily said, her voice gentle but firm. Oliver talks about her constantly. The way she sang to him, the stories she told, the way she made pancakes in funny shapes on Sunday mornings. Those memories are precious to him and to us. For the first time since they'd sat down, Morrison looked genuinely surprised.
You know about the pancakes?
I know about everything that mattered to Oliver, Lily replied. You learn to honor the love that came before you. The server appeared with menus and wine recommendations, giving everyone a moment to regroup. Morrison ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than Lily's monthly salary, making a show of tasting and approving it as if his palate could detect the difference between excellent and extraordinary. "So tell me about your family, Lily," he said. Once their glasses were filled, your background, your people. "I'm sure they're thrilled about your sudden elevation in social standing." "I don't have family," she said simply. "I grew up in foster care." "How tragic." "No wonder you're so drawn to playing house with someone else's child." Morrison's tone was sympathetic, but his eyes were calculating. "Must have been difficult moving from home to home, never knowing where you belonged." "It taught me too. Value the families we choose," Lily replied, "and to fight for the people we love, even when those people might not be who we think they are." The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Lucas's hand tightened on hers, a warning and a plea combined. "I'm not sure what you mean," Lily said carefully. "I mean that families are built on truth, don't you think? On knowing where we come from, who we really are. Take Oliver, for instance. Such a beautiful boy. He looks so much like Helen, doesn't it?" He has his father's eyes," Lily said firmly. "Does he?" Morrison pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photograph. "This is Helen and me at Martha's Vineyard, about 4 years ago. Oliver would have been conceived around then." The photo showed a younger, happier Helen laughing in Morrison's arms on a beach, her hair wild from the ocean breeze, her eyes bright with something that might have been love or might have been calculated performance. Superimposed in Lucas's phone screen, as Morrison held it up, that made Lily's blood freeze. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw, the way Oliver's mouth curved when he smiled. Not Lucas's features at all, but Morrison's. "You bastard," Lucas breathed, his voice barely controlled. "Actually, that would be Oliver, wouldn't it? If the paternity test I've requested comes back the way I expect it to," Morrison's smile was triumphant. "I've already filed the paperwork," court ordered naturally. "Helen's parents were very cooperative once I explained the situation." "You son of a bitch. You planned this from the beginning." "I loved Helen," Morrison said, his voice suddenly passionate, real. "I loved her long before she married you, before she settled for a man who could give her money but never understood her heart. Do you know what she told me the night she died? She said she was going to leave you, bring Oliver to me where they both belonged, but she never got the chance, did she? Because you used her." Lucas's voice was deadly quiet. "You seduced her, convinced her to betray her marriage, then sat back and watched it destroy us all. I gave her what you never could. Passion, understanding, a love that wasn't built on contracts and prenups, and carefully managed emotions." Morrison leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "She was going to leave you, Lucas. The only reason she didn't was because she died in that storm, driving away from a husband who'd rather lose her than fight for her." "Stop." Lily's voice cut through their escalating confrontation like a blade. Both men turned to her, surprised by the steel in her tone. "Oliver is upstairs in his bed right now, sleeping peacefully because he knows his parents love him." His biological parents, not his legal guardians, his parents. The people who get up with him when he has nightmares, who kiss his scraped knees, who read him stories and teach him how to be kind. You want to take that away from him for what? Revenge? Some twisted idea of justice for a woman who's been dead for 3 years? "I want to give him his real father," Morrison said, but some of the fire had gone out of his voice. "His real father is the man who's loved him every day of his life, who's sacrificed everything to keep him safe and happy." Lily stood, her composure cracking to reveal the fierce protectiveness underneath. "If you think biology trumps that, then you don't understand the first thing about being a parent." She turned to Lucas, who was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "We're leaving. Lily, wait." Morrison's voice stopped her. "You seem like a nice girl, smart, caring. Why are you willing to destroy your life for a man who's using you? Because that's what this is, isn't it? It's a marriage of convenience to help him win custody? What did he offer you? Money? A green card? A chance to play dress-up in his world?" "He offered me a family," Lily said quietly, "something you wouldn't understand. I understand more than you think." Morrison stood, his voice turning gentle. Persuasive. "I know what it's like to want something so badly you'll sacrifice everything for it. But Lucas will never love you the way you want him to. Still in love with Helen. still carrying that guilt. You'll spend the rest of your life competing with a ghost. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Lily felt Lucas flinch. Beside her, saw the truth in Morrison's observation reflected in her husband's carefully guarded expression. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'd rather love someone who can't love me back than help you use a little boy as a weapon in your war with the past." She walked away before either man could respond, leaving them staring at each other across a table littered with the wreckage of old wounds and new betrayals. Lucas caught up with her at the elevator, his face pale with something that might have been admiration or might have been fear.
Lily, I don't...
She pressed the button for the lobby, watching the numbers light up above the door. "Don't say anything right now. Need to think. He's right, you know." Lucas's voice was quiet, defeated. "About Helen. About me using you. About everything." "No." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "But he's wrong about Oliver. And right now, that's all that matters." They rode down in silence, two people bound together by promises they weren't sure they could keep, heading home to a little boy who trusted them to protect him from a world that wanted to tear his small life apart. Back in the restaurant, sat alone at their table, staring at the untouched plates of food and the half-empty bottle of wine. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "It's done," he said when Helen's mother answered. "The paternity test will prove what we've suspected all along. Oliver belongs with his real family, and the girl, Lucas's new wife, Morrison." Thought of Lily's fierce protectiveness, the way she'd spoken about love and choice and family. "She's stronger than I expected, but everyone has a breaking point. I'll find hers." "Be careful, David. If this backfires, it won't." Morrison's voice was cold, certain. "Helen died believing Lucas would never fight for what he loved. I'm going." To prove she was right? He hung up and signaled for the check, already planning his next move. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, all bright lights and hidden connections. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, Oliver Stone was sleeping in his dinosaur pajamas, unaware that the adults in his life were about to destroy everything he'd ever known in the name of love. The real war was just beginning. The paternity test results arrived on a Tuesday morning that dawned gray and bitter, matching the mood that had settled over the penthouse like a shroud. Lily found Lucas in his study, staring at the sealed envelope on his desk, as if it contained the secrets of the universe, or perhaps the end of everything he'd ever loved. "How long have you been sitting here?" she asked softly. "Since for this morning." His voice was hoarse with exhaustion and fear. "I keep thinking that as long as I don't open it, there's still hope." Lily moved behind his chair, her hands settling on his shoulders. The tension in his muscles was like stone. "Whatever it says, we'll face it together, will we?" He tilted his head back to look at her, his dark eyes haunted. "When it confirms that Oliver isn't mine, when Morrison takes him away, will you still want to be married to a man who has nothing left to offer?" "You have yourself to offer," she said simply. "That's enough for me." But even as she spoke the words, they both knew their marriage existed in the space between truth and necessity. If Oliver was taken away, what would hold them together besides? Shared grief and fading hope? The sound of small feet running down the hallway broke the morning's heavy silence. Oliver burst into the study, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled from sleep, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Daddy, Mama Lily, I had the best dream. We were all living in a castle and there were dragons, but they were friendly dragons, and they let me ride them to school." Lucas swept his son into his arms with desperate tenderness, holding him close, as if he could prevent the world from stealing him through sheer force of will. "That sounds like an amazing dream, little man. Can we have pancakes?" "Ones like Mommy used to make." Lily felt her heart clench. "Of course, sweet boy. Why don't you go wash your hands while I start breakfast?" After Oliver scampered away, Lucas stood with the envelope in his hands. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal, unfolded the single sheet of paper that would determine the rest of their lives. The silence stretched for so long that Lily began to fear the worst. Then Lucas looked up, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "It's inconclusive," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean inconclusive? The DNA samples were compromised, contaminated. The lab says they need new samples from all parties to run the test again. Lily frowned. How does DNA get contaminated? Someone tampered with them? Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes, followed quickly by rage. Morrison is playing games, trying to draw this out, make me sweat. Or maybe someone else interfered. A new voice from the doorway made them both turn. Helen's mother, Patricia Whitmore, stood in the entrance to the study, her usually perfect silver hair disheveled, her expensive coat wrinkled as if she'd slept in it. Patricia. Lucas rose, his voice carefully neutral. How did you get in here? Dorman knows me. I've been Oliver's grandmother for 3 years. She moved into the room with the careful grace of a woman trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. We need to talk. If you're here to serve more papers, I'm here to tell you that David Morrison is not the man we thought he was. Patricia's voice broke slightly. That Helen left something for you. Something I should have given you years ago. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Helen's handwriting sprawled across the front. In the flowing script, Lily recognized from old birthday cards and love notes tucked away in Lucas's desk. She wrote this the night before she died, Patricia continued. She came to see me, said she'd made a terrible mistake and needed to make it right. She asked me to give this to you if anything happened to her. Lucas stared at the letter as if it might burn him. Why now? Why wait 3 years to because I was angry? Because I blamed you for her death, for not fighting hard enough to keep her happy. Patricia's voice was thick with regret. Because David convinced me that you were cold, selfish, that Oliver would be better off with people who could love him properly. What changed your mind? I started asking questions about David's finances, his business dealings. Did you know? He's been siphoning money from Helen's trust fund. It's the fund that was supposed to secure Oliver's future? Patricia's laugh was bitter. He's been stealing from his own son. His own son. Lily's voice was sharp.
Ow.
You're confirming that Oliver is Morrison's child? I'm confirming that David Morrison is a liar and a thief who would destroy a family. To cover his crimes? Patricia looked at Lucas with something that might have been apology. Read the letter, Lucas. Helen wanted you to know the truth. With trembling fingers, Lucas opened the envelope and unfolded the pages inside. As he read, his face went through a series of emotions: shock, pain, relief, and finally, a kind of broken understanding. What does it say? Lily asked gently. Lucas's voice was rough when he spoke. She says the affair was never physical. Morrison manipulated her, made her feel neglected and unloved, convinced her that I didn't care about her happiness. But she never slept with him. She couldn't go through with it. Then Oliver is mine, has always been mine. Lucas looked up from the letter, tears streaming down his face. She was coming home to tell me everything, to ask me to forgive her for even considering leaving. She says she loved me, that she always loved me, but she felt invisible in her own marriage. Patricia wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. David knew she'd never betray her marriage vows, but he also knew that the suspicion, the doubt, would be enough to destroy your relationship and give him leverage over you both. The contaminated DNA samples, Lily said slowly. Morrison made sure they were unusable because he knew what they'd prove. He's been planning this for years, Patricia confirmed. The affair rumors, the custody challenge, even my cooperation. All of it designed to isolate Oliver and gain control of Helen's estate. Lucas stood abruptly, the letter clutched in his hand. Where is he? Lucas, no. Lily caught his arm. He's not worth destroying yourself over. He destroyed Helen. He's trying to destroy Oliver. He would have let me spend the rest of my life believing I wasn't my son's father. And if you go after him now, you'll lose Oliver anyway. Think, Lucas. What would Helen want you to do? The question stopped him cold. Lucas looked down at the letter at his wife's final words. Her plea for forgiveness and her absolute faith in his love for their son. She'd want me to be the father Oliver deserves, he said quietly. She'd want me to choose love over revenge. Always, Patricia said softly. That's who Helen was. It's who she'd want you to be. The sound of Oliver calling for pancakes drifted from the kitchen, innocent and trusting. Lucas looked at Lily, really looked at her, seeing past the careful boundaries they'd maintained to the woman who'd stood beside him through every crisis. Every doubt, every moment when his world threatened to collapse. "You saved us," he said wonderfully. "You saved us all. You saved each other." "No," cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "You married a stranger to protect a child who wasn't even yours. You fought for a family that existed only on paper. You loved us when we couldn't love ourselves. Lucas, I love you." The words fell between them like stones thrown into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. "I love your fierce heart and your gentle hands and the way you make Oliver laugh. I love that you see ghosts and choose to love the living anyway. What about Helen? Helen will always be part of our story. Oliver's mother, my first wife, the woman who brought us together even in death." Lucas's voice was steady, certain. "But you're my future, Lily, if you'll have me. Really have me, not just as a temporary arrangement or a legal convenience, but as a husband who wants to spend the rest of his life proving he deserves you." Before she could answer, Oliver appeared in the doorway, syrup already smeared on his cheek from the pancakes. He'd apparently decided to start without them. "Are you guys crying?" he asked with the blunt curiosity of a 3-year-old. "Happy tears," Lily said, kneeling to wipe his face. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're really, really happy." "Are we having a group hug?" Oliver opened his arms expectantly. Lucas laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. "We're definitely having a group hug." They wrapped their arms around each other there in the study, surrounded by legal documents and old grief and new possibilities. Through the windows, Manhattan sparkled in the late morning sun. City of dreams where second chances sometimes came disguised as desperate bargains and families were built from the wreckage of what came before. 6 months later, Morrison was indicted for embezzlement and fraud. The custody challenge disappeared with his credibility, and Oliver never knew how close he'd come to losing the only father he'd ever known. Lily kept her maiden name professionally, but wore her wedding ring with pride, teaching second grade at a school in Brooklyn where no one cared about her husband's money, but everyone loved hearing about the little boy who called her Mama Lily, and drew pictures of their family that always included dragons. Lucas learned to leave the office early, to make pancakes in funny shapes on Sunday mornings, to understand that the best mergers were the ones that happened at home between hearts that chose each other every single day. And sometimes, late at night when Oliver was asleep and the city was quiet, they would stand together on the terrace, overlooking the lights of Manhattan, and remember the night when a desperate father offered a lonely woman $1 million and accidentally found something worth infinitely more. Love couldn't be bought, they learned. But sometimes, if you were very lucky, this could be earned. Asterisk, subscribe for more heart-wrenching romance stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Asterisk, will love be enough to overcome lies, betrayal, and a custody battle that could tear their family apart? Can a broken billionaire learn to trust again? And what happens when the woman he hired to save his son ends up saving his heart? Asterisk like this. Video, if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales. And share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. The end.